Hi, everybody on YouTube. Welcome to the Inside Uni Q&A. This is our third Q&A, and it's about life as a first-generation student at Oxford, Cambridge, which we will come on to explain. So during the Q&A, if you want to just send us any message, just use the chat, which is on the side of the video, or sometimes underneath. And even now, just feel free to, I don't know, send us a wave, say hello. Yeah, and so just have a look. Make start. So, I mean, before we start, actually, what I'll do is I'll just give you an idea of what are these Inside Uni Q&As. So Inside Uni is a non-profit which is just working to help, I guess, make the Oxford and Cambridge and then hopefully more university applications more accessible and make student written information and advice about how to apply and kind of the process people went through more available. We've started this YouTube series to just give people a chance to chat to students about different aspects of Oxford and Cambridge life. And really here we're focusing a lot on the experiences. So if you want official information, the university websites are really good, particularly for some of the very specific questions. What times do I need to do something certain by, or what are the specific requirements for this? But definitely if it's more sort of general about student life, feel free to ask us. The agenda for the call will be, so we'll all start off with introductions. Then we're going to cover a few questions that were submitted in advance. And then we're going to come on to questions that you just want to ask us in the live chat and just keep sending them in and we'll have a list of them and answer them through. And that will take us to about 4:45. And then we'll do a little bit more and we'll wrap up at 5 o'clock. Yeah, and so a little bit, I've explained what Inside Uni is. We basically crowdsourced this advice from, it's nearly 2,000 Oxford and Cambridge students, where they talk a little bit about what it was like to apply and the sort of advice that they would just pass on to themselves if they were to do it again. You can find our website on InsideUni.org, which is free for anybody to access, and it's completely non-profit, and Helena will put that in the YouTube. Yeah, and Alex is going to start us off with, actually tell you what, before we do that, we'll do introductions and then Alex will explain what first generation actually means. So I'm Akil, an engineering student at the University of Cambridge.
Hi everyone, my name's Tom. I'm a second year and I study modern and medieval languages at Cambridge.
My name's Abby and I'm a third year finalist in classical archaeology and ancient history, or CAR for short, at Oxford.
My name's Charlie. I study French and Spanish at the University of Cambridge. I'm a third year, so I've just come to the end of my year abroad.
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a first year medic at Brasenose College, Oxford.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a second year biological natural sciences at Magdalen in Cambridge.
Hi, I'm Fran. I'm a first year classics student at Oxford.
Brilliant. And so Alex is just going to explain a bit about what first generation actually means. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, so first generation students are basically the first people in their immediate family to go to university. So the idea is that like your parents and like uncles and uncles and aunties and that kind of thing haven't been to university before. Like we look at, do you want me to move straight on to class act and that kind of thing as well? Yeah, so there's like specific societies in Oxford and Cambridge to represent people like that. So in Cambridge, we've got a thing called Class Act. This looks at like representing students who've come from any kind of like background that has been disadvantaged. So looking at like first generation students, like people who've experienced homelessness or economic disadvantage during their time. And we just look at like trying to make life at university as accessible for those kind of people as possible.
And first gen at Oxford is, as well as being the name of like first generation students, is also the name of a society which was set up quite recently, which aims to sort of provide a place for first generation students to meet each other and go to events which are usually subsidized or like partially funded. And they also do a lot of campaigning for like making first gen people more comfortable at the university.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And if anybody in the Q&As has in the audience has any more questions about that, feel free just to ask them and we can explain a little bit more. So now we're going to pick up a life in the day of 3 students doing sort of different subjects at each university. And we're going to start off with Tom.
Okay, so from an MML's perspective, so MML being modern and medieval languages, so I get up and have breakfast, hopefully like everyone else. I might skip breakfast every now and then if I'm in a rush, but I will head usually over to the Cedric site, which is where most humanities students in Cambridge have their lectures or classes. And I'll be there for a few hours at least. So I might have a translation class, looking at a text we've been given in advance. I might have a grammar session, looking at key points of grammar in one of the languages that I've done post A-level, so French. So that'll be sort of more complex grammar, or I might be doing sort of more remedial or basic grammar in the language that I've done from scratch or ab initio. So that one for me is Russian. And so I'll have maybe 2 or 3 classes when I'm at Cedric. That might not necessarily be, as I was saying before, translational grammar. It might include supervision. So that's one of the small group or one-on-one sessions with a lecturer or professor. So that'll be someone that I'm having a conversation with about one of my essays that I've written that week. So yeah, after a few hours of that, I'll usually head back to my college. Luckily for me, one of my colleges, one of the more centrally located ones, so it's not too far for me to wander back from lectures. I will have lunch either with friends or just by myself in my accommodation, and then I will head back out. Now, depending on the day, I might head back to Cedric site for another lecture if there's one later in the afternoon, or I might have another supervision at one of the other colleges around Cambridge. But then if I don't have anything on, I will head to the college cafe, sit and do a bit of my own work. If I have some stuff to do, might do a bit of reading, might grab a coffee, see some friends. And then in the evening, again, it really depends. But on an average day, I might pop out into town to do some shopping, to get my sort of weekly groceries, or maybe see a friend or two, and then head back to college for the evening, where I will do some more work, be that in my room or in the library. There's lots of spaces where you can do that kind of stuff. I personally prefer having a bit of noise around me. I can't really deal with deafening silence. So I tend to spend a lot of my time in the college cafe doing work. And then I'll have dinner, and depending on what everyone's doing or what work that I need to do, I might go out, I might stay in. But yeah, so I think for me personally, there's no typical day, but generally it consists of a nice balance of work and then having a bit of my own time as well to do things that I choose to do.
So I'm a classics student. A classics is basically anything to do with the ancient Greeks or Romans, which includes the languages. So I'll get up around 8:15, grumpily, and roll out of bed to my 8:45 Greek language lesson. I have these around 4 times a week, and then on the 5th day, I have a Latin lesson. And the amount of lessons you have in each language depends on how far you took these. So I took Latin to A level, which is why I only have it once a week. And then I hadn't done Greek before, so I have it 4 times a week. But don't worry if you haven't done either of these languages, you can still start them from scratch. After that, I will probably go grab a coffee with some people and maybe breakfast from my lesson. And then we'll head over to a lecture together. We have around 3 of these a week. And then after that, I will go grab lunch normally from college or one of my friends' colleges. So college is, I think at Oxford there's around 36, and every student has their own college, and it's kind of a community which you live in, and you have your own like tutors there, and you go to most of your tutorials there. And you can obviously, most of my friends are in college, but you do mix with a lot of people outside college as well. But I do have my language lessons outside of college. Sorry, that was a bit of a confusing answer. Anyway, after lunch, I normally head to the library. There is libraries within college, but I normally prefer to head to the Bodleian Library, which is like the big central library in Oxford. And then I stay there for about 3 or 4 hours until my tutorial, which is a bit like a supervision at Cambridge, where we just discuss our essays or we do some language work, either 1-on-1 or 1-on-2, sometimes 1-on-3. After that, I normally head back to my bedroom and I either watch Netflix or do more work, normally Netflix. And then I have choir 3 times a week. So I'll go to choir and then we'll have a service. And then afterwards we get free formal, which is like a 3-course dinner in hall. It's very nice, especially when it's free. And then I normally go to the bar with the rest of the choir and then either head over to see some friends and maybe go out, or just go like chill with some friends, maybe have like a little movie night. It really depends. So yeah, that's my day.
Great. And Chloe, did you talk a little bit about your day?
So the medic day varies between week, between day, between term, between college. But first term for me, it was about 10 lectures a week. So you'd maybe have 2 or 3 a day. There'd be maybe 2 labs a week. And then you would have 1 to 2 tutorials a week. So the average day you might start with a 9 a.m. All the Brasenose first year medics meet at the entrance to college and we all walk together. And then you might have a little break. So some people will go get brunch or they'll go to the library for a bit. And then you might have a 2 to 3 hour lab. So that's usually building on what you've done in the lectures. So you're in a little group, usually with your college, and you're just exploring something you've been learning about. We also have these sessions called DR, which is basically when you get human cadavers, so people who've donated their body to teaching. And we have demonstrators come in from the local hospital and teach us the anatomy. We also, with the tutorials, so that's with either a doctor or someone who's in medical research, and that's 2 or 3 of us, and they're usually about an hour. So you'll do some reading beforehand and then talk about your reading and then do an essay, or sometimes you write the essay and then go through it in the tutorial. But luckily medics usually have quite a free afternoon, so after about 4 o'clock or so, we don't have any contact hours, so we'll either spend that time doing the reading we need to do or catching up on lectures, or just enjoying life in Oxford. There is a lot of time as a medic to do other stuff as well. One of the medics plays netball a lot. She has a lot of time for that, so it's not all lectures and labs and reading. There is time.
Amazing. Okay, thank you, Chloe. So, and another thing I just wanted to mention, we've had quite a few questions that came in advance. A fair few of them were international questions. So for this call, we're mainly focusing on first generation, as Alex explained at the start. We are hoping to have a future Inside Uni Q&A where we'll actually get internationals in who have come from many different countries. So if we haven't answered very specific questions about internationals, it's just because we're hoping to get a call with like internationals who really know that inside out. Yeah, but certainly if there were aspects of your question that you submitted in advance and we haven't covered because maybe it was an international, if you want to make it a bit more specific to first generation or the subject, feel free to submit it in the live chat. So we'll start off with the first one of the submitted questions we got in, and this one is for Tom.
Okay, so the question we have is, what A-level subjects would you say are the most useful for a modern languages degree? Okay, so as I'm sure you can imagine, doing a language of some kind is very important for a languages degree. I think with both Oxford and Cambridge, the general requirement for MML is to do at least one of those languages to A-level. And if you do 2 languages, you can also do 2 languages post A-level as well. So yeah, it's basically you should be doing at least 1 language at A-level to do MML, which is modern and medieval languages. But you can also take a language from scratch, or ab initio is sometimes the phrase that they use, which means you've never studied it before, but you start it when you are at university. So yeah, number 1 is definitely having at least 1 language, or have 2 if you want to study both of those languages at university. On top of that, the good thing about languages is that well, I mean, lots of the degrees are anyway, but languages in particular is quite a broad subject, wherein it requires a lot of kind of different skills. And so there's no particular subject that is essential to do a modern languages degree. If you're doing languages at Oxford or Cambridge, you will be writing essays. So a subject where you're writing essays is useful. So say English literature or history or philosophy or religious studies, even geography as well. Any of those subjects that you're doing, some form of extended writing is great. But that being said, there's also other aspects of a languages degree that mean that other options for A-level or other forms of higher education, of sort of post-GCSE or post-16 education, are also very useful. So I know people that have done maths or physics and have done that in conjunction with their modern languages, and they are just as well placed to study languages here, because there are other aspects of language that require, for example, technical thinking or like decoding what's in front of you, all of which are developed by other different A-level options. So yeah, I would say definitely have a language, maybe two, and then anything else is really up to you. Follow your interests.
Can I just jump in and say really quickly, I also do languages, I do French and Spanish, and I know some people are quite put off by Oxbridge in general if they haven't done a really academic subject. So for example, I did media studies at A-level, which isn't always seen as particularly academic. And I know someone who actually did dance A-level and still got into Cambridge. And don't be put off by something that seems less academic or is more kind of vocational or creative, because you have just as much of a chance as everyone else, and those skills are valued here as well.
Okay, so about preparing for the BMAT. So I think the best way to do that is to use the official website. They have all of the past papers and all of the information you need to apply as well. So I think the best way to do the BMAT is to honestly just practice the papers. There's a few videos on YouTube that sort of go through the essay portion. There's also Medify, which I didn't use for BMAT, but I used it for the UK CAT. It can be very good, but you don't have to buy it. The past papers are more than enough, and I feel like if you go through a lot of them, you get an idea of what to do, and it is just practice. So yeah, I think the past papers are probably the best way to go.
So just a question on how much weight being a first-gen student has on your actual application. First thing that I would say about this is it isn't really going to disadvantage you. So the way that Oxbridge does applications is contextual. So they look for a number of markers which might like suggest any kind of like disadvantage that you've experienced. So like being a first-gen student, like free school meals, or like those kind of things. And pretty much your application will be taken on the like basis of its merit. You're not going to be like directly compared to someone else with that. I think the main thing that I definitely like to point out with this is whilst it is important to be getting the grades and that kind of thing, if you are getting like some of the best grades in your school, and you're coming from like a school which typically doesn't perform too well, that looks quite good compared to someone who's getting good grades in a school that gets like good grades generally. So generally, I would really just like to say that being a first-gen student doesn't have any kind of like impact on your chances of getting in. Every single application is looked at holistically.
So the next question was, how easy is it to meet people and make friends from a similar background like first gen? So I actually found this quite easy, but almost like accidental. So I just made friends with people at my college, which is Christchurch at Oxford, and it turned out that quite a lot of them were first gen like me, or like had similar like parental incomes or like school backgrounds. So that was really good. And then I also got involved with a couple of societies which were working to kind of like InsideUni to make other access resources for people. So I joined That Oxford Girl, which is like an Instagram and blog, as a writer and ambassador, and then went to a That Oxford Girl event. There's like 5 or 6 of them each term, and they range from like brunches to like evenings out, with a lot of like free things, like you don't have to pay for any food, which is really good. And then I met a lot of people there, and I met a lot of people who were involved in the first gen society. So then I joined that society, which again is like free to join, and they offer like free meals and things, so you can go and make friends at dinners. So I actually found it really easy. So I mentioned that I got involved in like access schemes. So those basically access means like making it easier for people to get into university regardless of their background. So like if you didn't go to a school that gives you lots and lots of information about Oxbridge applications, like putting out resources that are free to access and easy to access. And lots of colleges have something called an access and outreach rep, which is a member, a student member who works with staff in college to promote resources to like get people to apply to that college.
So the next question is, what financial support is available at Oxford and Cambridge? So on a uni-wide level, there is the Crankstart Scholarship, and from next year, I think the maximum income is £25,000, and then if your parents earn less than that, then you are automatically available to it. You don't have to apply or anything, just for student finance. And then there are the Oxford bursaries, which are really helpful, and they again depend on your parents' finance, although I do think it's different for estranged students and care leavers. And then there's also various scholarships. So I, for example, am on something called a Reuben Scholarship. It just popped in my email one day. I didn't have to apply for it. And then on a uni-wide level, I think your best way is to just go into the finance section of the Oxford website and just have an explore. And then all colleges are different, but some of them offer scholarships and then travel grants for the summer. And a lot of the colleges do offer book grants, which I have found really helpful. So some books you have to buy for your course, you just give them the receipt and they will refund it for you, which is really, really great.
So for example, at my college, which is Christchurch at Oxford, there's a bursary for everyone whose parental income is below £40,000 per household. And it sort of goes down in increments up to ultimately, if your household income is below £16,000 and you're a UK home student, then you have half price food and accommodation in college, which is a massive saving. But I didn't know about that until after I'd applied. So I think maybe the best thing to do is like check the college websites quite carefully and maybe email different colleges if you're not sure what financial help is available.
Just going to talk a little bit about financial help that you'd find at Cambridge. So similar kind of system at the uni-wide level, there's the Cambridge bursary. You get up to £3,500 a year, which is like graded on your parental income. So I think everyone who gets whose parental income is like below around £25,000 gets the full amount of the bursary. Anyone above that, then it kind of like grades down as you go. On top of that, there's a couple of other scholarships. So as Fran said, there's the Reuben Scholarship that happens in Cambridge as well. And again, looking at the college level, each college has got like little pots of money lying about. So for example, at my college, I get an extra £1,500 on top of the £3,500 from the university level. I think that, well, the university has made a commitment that like no one's going to be disadvantaged from studying due to financial reasons. And I think that like if you need any like help financially, the universities are really good at covering it.
I also forgot to mention that a lot of the colleges also have hardship funds. So if you do find like in the middle of term or something that you're like in need or something's happened, you can just tell the college and they're normally really supportive about helping out, and just, yeah, that's what the money is there for, to help you.
A couple of people have mentioned this process being slightly different if you're estranged or a care leaver, or you come from a different kind of family background. And if you are in a situation, especially if you're in the process of applying for student finance now, I'd really recommend looking at the Standalone website, which is Standalone is a charity which helps support estranged students and students who are care leavers. They have lots of advice, and also UCAS have a specific page for students who are estranged and don't have family support that you can look at, which will help you through university application process and also the student finance process. And there is actually a larger loan available. I'm not quite sure the exact numbers, but there is a larger loan available for students who are estranged. The qualification of estranged is quite strict, so you have to kind of make sure that you fit into that. So you can have a look at that as well. And also my college, for example, gives me loads of financial support because I have to stay in Cambridge over the breaks because I don't have a home to go back to. And generally whenever I email and say I'm short on money, I need some money, people are really understanding that not everyone comes from the same background, not everyone has a family or even family support that they can rely on financially. So I will send a link to the people organising this event and they'll be sure to share it with you.
So someone asked if it's really difficult for international students to apply for medicine. So I think that it's much the same. Well, I'm not international, but I think it's much the same to national applications, except that your interviews might be online, so via Skype. I think there's more information on the InsideUni website, but generally you would do the BMAT, which you would probably have a test centre to do somewhere close to you. And there's more information about that on the BMAT website. And then you would have your interviews, like I say, probably over Skype. But other than that, I don't think there's any real difference. So the interviews would be with the tutors that would be working with you if you did end up coming to Oxbridge. And it would just be asking you questions based on the stuff you've learned or trying to get you to think, looking at data and graphs or clinical stuff and ethical stuff. But yeah.
And Chloe, I think there was a question that kind of went with that, but can you speak about what the medication, mind you, I guess you've spoken about what the application involved generally. If anybody's got more specific questions on that, feel free to follow up. And again, medicine's clearly pretty popular, so we will aim to get a panel of 6 medics. And again, with internationals, we will certainly target that. Charlie, another question your way.
Yeah, so we've been asked, is it common to feel imposter syndrome? If so, how do you overcome this? So imposter syndrome is the feeling that I think pretty much everyone can relate to, regardless of background, that you've kind of got into somewhere based on a fluke, or that you don't belong, or that you're kind of different to everyone else there. And, you know, it affects your confidence a lot because you feel like, yeah, I mean, obviously, most of us have experienced it at some time or another, but it makes you feel like, you know, it's scared to speak up sometimes because you feel like you're the only person experiencing certain things, or yeah, that you don't belong. I wouldn't say it's common in that every person feels it all the time, but I think that a lot of people have definitely experienced it at one time or another. Either, you know, I've definitely had experiences where I'm asked a question directly in like a small 1-on-2 situation, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. And I think, how on earth did I get in here? And I think that's definitely a common experience. Having spoken to my friends, a lot of us feel that, regardless of background. And one thing that I do to overcome this, which isn't available to everyone, but for me what helps is keeping in touch with some of my teachers from sixth form. I'm still in touch with my media studies teacher. We send a couple of emails a year, and it just really reminds me where I've come from, how hard I worked to get in here, that I do deserve to be here, and that there are people who backed me and believed in me along the way. Obviously not everyone is in that situation, but it can be quite helpful just to think about, you know, I put in so many hours for my revision for my A-levels, of course I deserve to be here. And also that everyone kind of is pretending all the time to know more than they do. And you know exactly how much you personally don't know about a subject or a topic or anything, but you always assume that other people know more than you do, and that's not always the case. A lot of people are in the same situation where they have only little bits and bobs of knowledge, but they put on a front that they know everything. And the fact that we know our own weaknesses better than others often means that we are harsher on ourselves than we should be.
Yeah, so to add to that, I completely agree that on the whole, from my perspective, I haven't felt out of place all the time in Cambridge. I think, as Charlie was saying, there's definitely moments that everyone has of imposter syndrome that partially could be due to the general sort of being in Oxbridge, regardless of your background. But then on top of that, you might have moments that are specifically related to being first gen or class act, etc. So yeah, there are moments, particularly I think what people might be worried about is the fact that Oxford and Cambridge are quite traditional places. And sometimes walking into some of those buildings you might think, oh gosh, why am I here? This is very much out of place. I feel very much out of place here. But those moments are very isolated. And I think once you get here and once you are exposed to not only people from your own background, but people from different backgrounds, you start to feel more comfortable in yourself and more comfortable in the area you're in. That's not to say that it's a smooth process and it disappears the moment you walk through that door and start at uni. But I think it's definitely a process that you do overcome over time. And if you do have moments where that might lapse, I think finding or seeking refuge in like the college community or seeking refuge in the sort of first gen or class act sort of groups and societies that are designed to support you, that's like a really good way of addressing those kinds of feelings. But yeah, so as I was saying, I don't think I've experienced isolation on the whole. I think it's just definitely an example of, you know, brief moments of self-doubt that everyone goes through. But yeah.
Just got a question from Akila. How significant are college stereotypes? So I think that sometimes when thinking about like Oxbridge specifically, there's an idea of like this like typical Oxbridge student that is like posh and like generally from a rich background, and generally that isn't true. I mean, there's a nice mix of people in Oxford and Cambridge, and whilst like you'll find different people all over the place, and sometimes some people may be more loud than others and that kind of thing, like the differences between colleges aren't really that massive. Like I think we'll explain a little bit about this later, but like colleges are pretty much just like your home ground. It's the kind of people that you'll live with, study with, eat with, that kind of thing. And like there isn't a massive difference between each one, and pretty much you'll love whichever one you end up at. Yeah.
A bit more on this. I personally was someone who did a lot of research into the colleges and fell very much into the stereotypes, and was eventually persuaded into applying to my college because they gave me free ice cream. But then I realized that they had quite a big stereotype of where fun went to die. And it, you know, that wasn't really a place I wanted to be in. But since arriving, it's definitely not. Everybody is so lovely. There's such a wide range of people here. And I think that goes from all of the colleges. And then even if you do find when you get to the colleges that you don't really like the sort of people that are there, there's always societies and like different groups you can join, and you will find someone that you can fit in with and hang about with.
Okay, so coming back to a question about learning something you've never done before, or doing a subject that you perhaps haven't studied before, specifically at A level, and feeling sort of disadvantaged by the fact that you're first gen. So my personal experience, if you just tuned in, I was explaining that I did one language from scratch when I got to university. So this is known as ab initio. So you've not done the language before. So I started learning Russian when I started at Cambridge. And the way the course works, at least in Cambridge for modern and medieval languages, is you do 1 year in your first year of the sort of ab initio course, so the beginner's course. And then in your second year, you sit what people who've done it for A level did in their first year. So you're almost sitting 2 first year sort of courses, but you go from beginner and they take you from nothing up to supposedly sort of A level standard. And then you go back and start again. That doesn't change your course trajectory. It's what everyone does if they're doing a new language. It just means that by final year, when you sit your final exams, you're supposedly at the same level as people who have done it at A level. And so I won't say it's not challenging. I think, particularly for Russian, but any ab initio language really, that it's not plain sailing. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. You really have to commit to learning that language in such a short space of time. Not least because Cambridge and Oxford terms are short in of themselves. But I think the great thing about these courses is that it gives the opportunity to people who haven't had the opportunity previously to study those subjects to do it at A level and beyond. And I've absolutely loved doing it. I mean, I knew when I was applying that I really wanted to do Russian. and that the fact that I could do it from scratch at Cambridge, I think you can do it at Oxford as well, was a really sort of attractive opportunity that I didn't want to miss out on. But yeah, I think if you want to study something new, definitely read around at first and make sure it's something you want to study, but don't feel put off and don't feel like you have to stick within the precincts of what you've studied before at university.
So I think personally, I'd hope that if I was going to uni to study something, then I'd want to be coming across something new. But obviously, like, I can understand why you'd be really anxious about other people like seeming to know more than you. And I guess with my subject, so I do classical archaeology and ancient history. Even if you'd done like Latin and Greek to A level and like classical civilizations and knew like everything that you could know about in school, you'd still come across loads of topics that you haven't known about, and everyone would be in that same boat. So I remember really clearly, like, our first essay of first year was on like this really, really niche topic about like a tyrant on a specific Greek island that no one had ever heard of. And I remember reading it and being like, I have no idea what's going on. But then it turned out no one else did either. And then one of my papers has a time span of like 1200 years and covers the entire ancient Mediterranean and like northern Africa and Asia. So you physically like could not know everything there is to know about that time period and geographical span. So I'd say, like, don't be put off by coming across new resources. It's actually really exciting.
So somebody's said that they're in year 11 and their school aren't really helpful towards preparing for your interview. So I had a bit of the same experience. My school were really supportive, but they hadn't really sent anyone to do medicine or Oxbridge before, so they just didn't really know how to help me. So it wasn't fault of trying. I think the best thing that you can do is just be comfortable talking. So I used to stand in front of a mirror and just like talk about a question for about 2 or 3 minutes, just to practice hearing myself speak out loud. You'll also probably have MMI interviews, which are like multiple mini interviews at other medical schools, and sometimes they can come before the Oxford one and sort of give you a little bit of practice. I think another really good thing that I did for Oxford was I printed off a load of random graphs from Google and just annotated them, because Oxford interviews are about how you think, and the tutors want to see your process of trying to work something out. It's not a test of how much you know, it's a test of how you're working through something. So I was just annotating the graphs, like what they could mean, what implications it could have, all that sort of stuff, and just trying to think about it without any context. And it turns out in one of my interviews I had a very similar thing to that. But I think the best thing is just being confident and accepting that you won't know everything in any interviews, and especially in an Oxford interview, if you don't know something, try, and if you get confused, just say like, I'm sorry, I don't know, could you repeat that, or could you rephrase it? Because the tutors aren't trying to grill you, they're just trying to see if it would work and whether you would be compatible with them and they'd be compatible with you. So it's not like a really big test, so don't be too scared.
Yeah, so I had quite a similar experience. Like my school did want to help, but they hadn't really sent many people before. So it was like, yes, this is fine. There's a couple of things that you can do to help yourself prepare for it. One of the most useful things that I did was actually just chat about my subject to some of my friends, or maybe even like the teacher or something like that. It's just useful to like get used to talking about your subject, like in an academic sense, as opposed to just like coffee table chat, that kind of thing. I think a couple of other things as well is there's a lot of resources out there that you can use. Like the university has got like what to expect from an interview, like what the like structures of that kind of thing. If you look on like the YouTube pages, which we can get a link posted later on. On top of that as well, in terms of like support for this kind of thing, there's a thing called the link area like scheme. So every college in Oxford and Cambridge is actually linked to a specific part of the UK. Like if you go on the website, you'll be able to find out what college you're linked to, and they might be able to provide a little bit extra support and that kind of thing. They're more likely to give you more general support because they don't want to like do like interview coaching and personal statement coaching, but like they're able to give you that kind of like more generalized support. Yeah.
Yeah, so I also found that I didn't really have anyone to talk to about subject specific things. And like Alex said, it's really useful to be able to talk through your opinions about subjects. So what I used to do was listen to podcasts that were like thought provoking, and sort of go on long walks and like talk through ideas in my head. And then I think it actually made me look forward to interviews more, because personally I found that my interviews were just me talking to tutors who were really interested in the topics I was interested in, and it was the first time that that had happened. So it actually made me like look forward to interviews and then look back on them quite fondly, rather than like be scared of them. And then I think on another note, in terms of like preparing for the application, it can be really difficult if you don't have any like school or parental support with like personal statements, because they're quite like a tricky thing to master. But then I think like on InsideUni's website, there's lots of like subject specific resources for like things to read about to get into personal statements. And then on the website, that Oxford Girl, which I've also mentioned, there's loads of advice there on writing personal statements. So I think just like finding those resources and like reading what other people have said about personal statements, and like thinking about what you can put in them, and also not being worried if you don't have the resources to like spend loads of money on like this specific book. Just like write about what you're interested in. And yeah, I think like if you just keep showing that you're really interested, then it almost doesn't matter so much if you're like not really specific about like having that support.
And just to jump in with what Abby said there, for InsideUni, most of our support at the moment is like very much focused on specific subjects. For the personal statement itself, how to write it, we don't have anything specific on that just yet. I believe UCAS do, and as Abby said, that Oxford Girl. But certainly if you're looking for ideas of what can I talk about or what can I go and read, definitely InsideUni has a lot of good stuff for that.
I just want to jump back in as well and address something. It's quite a good thing to think about as well if you don't actually have people to talk to. So like, to be fair, I came across like some resistance when I'm trying to talk to like my friends about like subjects. It's like, well, why would you want to talk about that over lunch? But there's a lot of different things out there that you can use to actually get in touch with like Oxbridge students. For example, Project Access and Zero Gravity, they're like mentoring schemes. We can add a couple of links later on, but it's a really useful thing, and like you get paired up with someone from Oxford or Cambridge, depending on which one you're interested in going to. And basically they take you through a bunch of like different stuff to help prepare you for the interview, and like personal statements and that kind of thing. It's really good for getting that kind of one-on-one support that it's difficult to get elsewhere, I think.
Okay, so we've been asked, is it affordable to study and live in Oxford and Cambridge? So first off, I just want to reiterate what we were talking about earlier, that there are lots of funds available for you, because I think in general, Oxford and Cambridge are seen as quite expensive cities, not as expensive as London, but if you live in the north currently and you're coming to Oxford or Cambridge, it might be a little bit more expensive than you're used to. But there are lots of funds available. There are hardship funds available if you're struggling. But just to give you a rough idea, rent varies between colleges, both in Oxford and in Cambridge. So one thing I recommend is looking, if you have an idea of what colleges are like in your shortlist, you might not. I know that I didn't. I applied to Christ because they had a cat, and then I got pulled to Newnham. So if you don't have an idea, like that's fine. But one thing to do is look at college websites and see what their rent is. Generally they will do it per term, so you might have to compare via terms, but I am going to give you rent wise. Generally it's between, I have friends who pay about £300 a month. I used to pay £650 a month. I now live privately and I pay £425 a month, but I'm sharing with someone, so we split the rent between us. So it really does vary, and college websites will give you a better idea of that. In terms of food, I probably spend between £100 and £150 a month, sometimes less, sometimes more. I tend to do a bulk order to get delivered at the start of every term, which will be about £60, and then shop for fresh food over the weeks. And I also treat myself quite often to Deliveroo. Clubbing really depends. I don't really go clubbing, but I've spent between £20 and £30 on a night out. You can quite often get cheap tickets for club nights in advance before you go out via like college reps, because college reps will sell wristbands at a reduced price, or if you pay on the door, it will obviously be a little bit more expensive. Again, I think this is kind of quite standard. This was the price in my hometown, but if you're from up north where it's £3 a pint, I envy you, and it's more expensive here. And one thing you also want to consider is if you're going to be going back to your hometown, if you have one, transport home is obviously going to be more expensive if you're going back to Scotland than if you're going to London or Norwich. I'm from Norwich, so it's quite cheap for me. So something to to factor into any budgeting that you're doing. So yeah, to sum up, it's quite an expensive place, not the most expensive, not the least expensive, but there is lots of funds available to you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And guys, so it's 1:45 now. We've still got quite a few questions coming in, so we will keep talking about them, but we are going to finish on the hour, probably about 5 to we'll finish questions. So if you've got more questions, please just send them our way. Abby, did you want to add something more to that? If not, we can go straight to Tom.
I think Charlie pretty much covered all of it, but I was just going to say, like, when you're applying for colleges, I applied for Christchurch because they had accommodation for all 3 years, and I was like too scared to rent things, and was worried about that being expensive. But then actually my friends who've done that, they just kind of like got on with it, and staying in college has its downsides. Like, you get moved out at the end of each term, so if you wanted to live in the city for the whole year, then private rent is better. So I think that's something to consider, but it's also like maybe not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on the end there that basically with affordability, the good thing about Cambridge, I'm not sure if it's the same in Oxford, but when you have your little sort of university card that says that you're a member of the university, there are lots of shops around the city that you can use to get student discounts. There's lots of sort of online stuff as well to get student discounts. I think if you're thrifty enough, you can get a lot of money off of lots of different places. I mean, I think even some sort of restaurants in Cambridge can give you as much as like 40% off if you've got a student card. But again, it depends on the sort of different places. But yes, it's definitely something to be made aware of, that like if you have a student card or if there's other ways, you can find discounts as well for stuff. So if you're thinking you're having to pay top dollar for everything, try and find some thrifty ways of getting around it if you can.
Cool, just another question. I've got a disability, what support's available to me? So in Cambridge, there's a thing called the Disability Resource Centre, which is basically a dedicated team run by the university to essentially make sure that any kind of like adjustments that you need are covered. This can range from everything from like a physical disability, a learning disability, or like issues of mental health and that kind of thing. They're really supportive with this kind of thing, and like you get like disability advisors who essentially like help you write documents to say these are the adjustments that I need, and like you can get like specific support, so like counselling help and that kind of thing, as well as mentors to basically help you keep everything together, if you get what I mean. There's a lot of support for this kind of thing, both on the university and the college level.
So I'm coming at this from more of a mental health point of view. So before Oxford, I'd never really had any disability support. But when I started at Oxford, my mental health got a lot worse just because of other circumstances that were going on. And my doctor recommended that I go to the disability service. So I got a support plan put in place, which just makes things a bit easier in my studies. I can record lectures. I've got like counsellors and advisors, and just so it makes everyone around me and all the lecturers and the tutors a bit more aware of what I'm going through, so I don't have to go up to them and explain everything. I can just sort of give them my support plan, and then everyone knows.
Quite a few Oxford colleges have also recently started implementing their own private counsellors. So they'll typically be in like 1 day a week. So Christchurch have one, and she's lovely, and she looks like Kate Blanchett, which is also fun. And yeah, she's actually genuinely really, really helpful.
I think one other thing that I completely forgot to mention is there's also the like different campaigns. So in Cambridge, we've got the DSC, Disabled Students Campaign. It's essentially just like part of the Students' Union that are there to essentially like help the people get the kind of support if they're struggling to know where to go for it and that kind of thing?
Okay, so really quickly about work experience with medicine. I didn't know any doctors either. The Oxford understands that not everyone can get this really impressive work experience, and actually they don't really want you to have really impressive work experience. They'd rather that you have something you've reflected on and learned from. That's the important bit. So a week in a care home, or if any of your teachers know a doctor maybe, or you can reach out to a GP nearby and ask to shadow them for a day. Whatever you can get, just working with people is the main thing, and it's what you get from that rather than what you see and what you do.
Brilliant, thank you, Chloe. So what we'll do is we're going to do 2 more bits now. We've had one question and everybody's going to answer these questions. So the first one we'll talk about is our favourite thing about the universities, and then the second one we'll talk about is kind of the one thing that we really would recommend or we loved when we came to apply as a resource. So yeah, we'll start off with Tom. What is your favourite thing about being a student at Oxbridge?
I would have to say the city itself, I think. So I don't live in a city, I live in quite a rural area. And so going to Cambridge, where it's not a huge city and as sort of overwhelming as somewhere like London, but it's still sort of a city environment. It's very pretty, very nice to walk around, especially in the summer, which is obviously unfortunate at the moment that we can't be there. But it's a beautiful city and I just love being in that environment.
So for me, Oxford really feels like home, and kind of like Tom said, just like everything about the university and the city is really great, and I just miss it so much when we're not there.
For me, it's the amount of funding that is available to help me pursue opportunities that I haven't had the chance to pursue before, like language classes, music classes, private counselling, things that they have lots of funds available to help you do things.
I think mine would have to be the people. The friends I've made are from such different backgrounds, and everyone's just so amazing and unique, and it really does feel like home.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chloe. Like the community within colleges and like within different societies is definitely my favourite thing about Cambridge.
I think probably just like Charlie said, the resources available to you, like you could take part in anything you wanted to, and then there's so many libraries and just places to go. It's just really wonderful.
Okay, so I think we've got time to just quickly mention a resource that each of us has found useful whilst sort of we've been applying. So for me personally, I definitely found that my sort of most accurate source was the university website itself. I think it always has the most up-to-date information, and it sort of bypasses the risk of being victim of sort of misinformation or sort of well-intentioned sort of advice from people that might not be 100% accurate. So yeah, I'd definitely say the university website, and more specifically the department or faculty that you're thinking of applying to for a specific course, that will have the most up-to-date information.
So for me, I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but I really like the blog and Instagram, The Oxford Girl, because they post really bite-sized posts about like everything to do with applying. So I used to read them at the bus stop on the way to school, and now like 5 years later, it's grown and grown. So there's loads and loads of different personal perspectives on there. So there's genuinely something that someone from every kind of walk of life has written. So it's really useful.
For me, I have 2. The first one is specifically for languages, podcasts on Spotify in the target language that are created for native speakers of that language. I will link one in French, I'll send it. And then secondly, college-run student Instagram accounts. So there's quite a lot of college Instagram accounts which are like run by official members of like the college administrative team. And there's also alternative ones which are run by the student unions, which are really good and offer a more kind of unfiltered representation of what life in a college is like.
So I used a lot of different online resources, even like YouTube is a really good one, but the Medic Portal and Medify are really good ones. But just try not to get sucked into like finding a checklist and meeting all these certain criteria. You don't have to be this big doctor now. You don't have to know all of these conditions because that's what they're going to teach you. So just try to not stress about it too much, which is easier said than done. But yeah.
Yes, so my like favorite ones are like the alternative prospectuses. So you've got like timetables and like different college descriptions and that kind of thing. And on top of that, also a thing from Cambridge, the Students' Union called CamTweet. Essentially, there's one account per subject, and people just tweet about their lives and answer Q&As. Yeah.
So I found the student alternative perspectives really useful as well. They've got different subject interviews with different people, but then also the individual college websites. If you go into them, you can often find blogs or things by the students just helping you to apply.
Thank you so much, everybody. So I'm going to wrap up now. If you've got more questions, Helena has posted a Google form in the Google chat a few messages ago, and you can just send more questions to us on that. And yeah, I'm aware like today we had a lot of international questions submitted at the start beforehand, and we definitely will come on to that, and medicine as well, clearly super popular. So we are going to, over the next few weeks, we basically just need to reach out to students and then find a panel together. People are in the middle of exams at the moment, which is why it's all a bit, sort of difficult to organise, but certainly we will work on those. And if you want to check out Inside Uni on Facebook, we've got the same logo as the logo on the YouTube channel, so it's pretty easy to find the page. Also on Instagram, which is inside.uni, and Twitter, which is inside_uni. The website, insideuni.org. And via any of those channels, you can just keep on tabs on what we're doing. And when we announce the next Q&A. But yeah, certainly if you've got more questions, please feel free to send them on the form. And I'm just double checking to make sure, is there anything else I want to say? No, I think, yeah, that's really it. But thank you so much for all those people who tuned in, and we hope to see you fairly soon. Bye.